I'm Billy Andrews, 32, and I was supposed to inherit my family's construction empire that I helped build from the ground up. Instead, my father betrayed me by handing our business to my sister's manipulative boyfriend, Travis. The pain of being pushed aside from my own legacy was unbearable, but I chose strategic silence over confrontation. I disappeared to rebuild myself, only to return stronger and turn their world upside down. Before I dive into how I lost everything but gained so much more, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to see how I flipped the script on those who betrayed me. Andrews Construction wasn't just a company to me. It was my heritage, my future, and my passion. From the age of 5, I remember sitting on my father's shoulders as he walked through half-finished buildings, explaining the importance of a solid foundation. Everything we build starts from the ground up. Billy, he'd say, his voice filled with pride. One day all of this will be yours. Those weekend visits to construction sites shaped my entire life trajectory. While other kids played video games, I was learning to read blueprints. When teenagers were deciding which parties to attend, I was taking additional math and physics classes to prepare for engineering school. There was never any question about what I wanted to do with my life. Andrews Construction was in my blood. After graduating with dual degrees in business management and construction engineering, a grueling 5-year program I completed with honors, I joined the company officially at 22. Despite being the owner's son, I insisted on starting from the bottom. I worked as a site manager's assistant, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. Those first years were brutal but rewarding. I'd arrive at job sites at 5 a.m., often not leaving until after 7 p.m. I learned how to negotiate with suppliers, manage difficult subcontractors, and solve the inevitable problems that arose on complex construction projects. My hands grew calloused from occasionally stepping in to help the crews when we were behind schedule. No job was beneath me, and the workers respected that. My father, Robert Andrews, was a tough but fair boss. During those early years, we had the strongest relationship we'd ever had. He'd invite me to his office at the end of particularly challenging days, pour 2 fingers of whiskey for each of us, and we'd discuss what I'd learned. He never let me make excuses or blame others, a principle I valued, even when it was difficult to hear. "You've got good instincts, son," he told me, on my 3rd anniversary with the company. "Better than mine were at your age. This company will thrive under your leadership someday." My sister Natalie, 3 years younger than me, never showed any interest in the family business. While I was spending summers interning at construction sites, she was at art camp or traveling with friends. I never begrudged her different path. Construction wasn't for everyone, and she had other talents. She eventually settled into a marketing career at a local agency, and we maintained a close sibling relationship despite our different interests. By my 5th year with the company, I had worked my way up to operations manager, overseeing multiple projects simultaneously. I introduced new project management software that increased our efficiency by 32%, saving hundreds of thousands in our first year using it. I secured relationships with new clients that expanded our business beyond residential construction into more lucrative commercial projects. The company grew from a $5 million operation to over $20 million in annual revenue during the next 5 years, with much of that growth coming from initiatives I had championed. I was working 70-hour weeks, sacrificing my personal life for the business. A few relationships ended because I couldn't give them the attention they deserved. Holidays were often spent reviewing year-end numbers rather than relaxing with family. "You need to find some balance," Billy, my father, would occasionally say, though he'd worked the same punishing hours building the business in his younger days. "I'll rest when we hit $50 million. I'd reply, only half joking. My dedication wasn't just about money or success. It was about building something meaningful that would last generations. The promise that Andrews Construction would someday be mine drove me forward through exhaustion and sacrifice. I believed I was securing my future and honoring my father's legacy. Little did I know that the foundation I thought was solid was about to be shaken to its core. Everything changed when Natalie brought Travis Hoffman to Sunday dinner at my parents' house. He was tall, conventionally handsome, with perfectly styled hair and a smile that seemed practiced in front of a mirror. His handshake was firm but slightly too long, and he maintained eye contact in a way that felt calculated rather than genuine. "Natalie has told me so much about your amazing family business," he said, focusing intensely on my father. "What you've built from nothing is truly inspiring, sir." Travis worked in pharmaceutical sales, a field entirely unrelated to construction, but he spent that first dinner asking my father detailed questions about the business. At the time, I appreciated his interest, thinking it was just his way of connecting with Natalie's family. "Your son has clearly inherited your business acumen," Travis said, nodding toward me. The expansion into commercial projects was brilliant. My father beamed with pride, both at the compliment to himself and the acknowledgement of my contributions. My mother seemed charmed by Travis as well, commenting later about how polite and ambitious he seemed. Over the following months, Travis became a regular at family gatherings. Despite my initial warmth toward him, something about his interest in our business began to feel off. He had never shown any previous interest in construction, yet suddenly he was subscribing to industry magazines and dropping construction terminology into conversations. About 6 months into his relationship with Natalie, Travis began suggesting golf outings with my father. Soon they were playing weekly rounds together, something my father had often been too busy to do when I suggested it. They'd return from these outings, laughing like old friends, sometimes having stopped for drinks afterward. "Travis has some interesting ideas about expanding our client base," my father mentioned casually after one such outing. "He thinks we should be targeting more corporate clients, focusing on office renovations." "That's basically what I proposed in the growth strategy I gave you last month," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Was it? Well, great minds think alike, I guess," my father replied dismissively. Travis started showing up at the office initially just to take Natalie to lunch. Soon, however, my father was inviting him to sit in on meetings where he had no official role or expertise. During one particularly important client presentation that I had prepared for weeks, Travis interrupted multiple times with suggestions that contradicted our carefully planned approach. To my shock, my father seemed impressed rather than annoyed by these interruptions. "Travis thinks outside the box," he told me afterward when I expressed concern. Sometimes we get too stuck in construction industry thinking. The first major red flag came during a strategy meeting about a potential expansion into green building practices, an initiative I had researched extensively. As I began my presentation, my father said, "Before Billy starts, Travis has some thoughts on this direction I'd like everyone to hear." Travis stood and presented almost the exact same concepts I had discussed with my father privately the week before, but framed as his original ideas. When I caught my father's eye, he looked away, seemingly aware of what was happening but unwilling to acknowledge it. After the meeting, I confronted Travis privately. "Those were my ideas you presented today." He smiled, not even bothering to deny it. "Robert and I discussed them on the golf course. I just helped refine them a bit. We're all on the same team here, right, Billy?" As weeks passed, Travis inserted himself further into the company's operations. He began joining my father for meetings with our bank, with key clients, and with our attorneys. When I asked my father why Travis was being included in confidential business discussions, he became defensive. "Travis has a fresh perspective that's valuable to me. And he's practically family now. Natalie tells me they're talking about marriage." The situation reached a breaking point when my father invited Travis to our annual leadership retreat, an event previously restricted to executives and key project managers. During the retreat, Travis proposed an aggressive expansion plan that would require millions in new debt and stretched our resources dangerously thin. To my dismay, my father enthusiastically supported the plan despite its obvious risks. When I raised concerns about the financial exposure, Travis smoothly suggested that perhaps I was too cautious and afraid of bold moves. Construction is changing, Travis said, looking around the room at my colleagues. We either adapt or get left behind. The proposal was approved over my objections, and I left the retreat with a sinking feeling that something fundamental had shifted in my relationship with my father and my place in the company. That night I called Natalie to express my concerns about Travis's growing influence. "You're being paranoid, Billy," she said sharply. "Travis is just trying to help Dad modernize the business. Maybe if you weren't so controlling, you'd see that his ideas are actually good for the company." I hung up realizing that my sister, too, had somehow been turned against me. The boyfriend who had appeared out of nowhere had somehow positioned himself at the center of both our family and our business in less than a year. And I was increasingly on the outside looking in. The official announcement came during a Monday morning executive meeting. My father stood at the head of the conference table, Travis smugly seated at his right hand, my usual spot. "I've been considering our management structure," my father began, not quite meeting my eyes. "As we grow, we need additional leadership. Effective immediately, Travis will be joining us as co-vice president, working alongside Billy." The room fell silent. No one dared look at me directly. Travis had never worked a day in construction, had no relevant education, and had been in our lives less than a year. Yet somehow, he had been elevated to my level in the company I had helped build since childhood. After the meeting, I requested a private conversation with my father in his office. "Dad, what's going on? Travis has no experience in this industry. Why would you put him in a leadership position?" My father leaned back in his chair, a defensive posture I recognized from difficult negotiations with contractors. "Travis brings fresh perspective and exceptional people skills. Not everything is about technical knowledge, Billy. Sometimes charisma and vision matter more. But he doesn't know the first thing about construction margins, regulatory requirements, or project timelines," I argued. "The team won't respect his authority." "That's exactly the kind of elitist attitude that concerns me," my father shot back. "You think only people with fancy degrees deserve a seat at the table. Travis connects with people. He sees opportunities you miss because you're too focused on details." I left his office stunned. The father, who had once valued meticulous planning and proper training above all else, was now dismissing those qualities as liabilities. Over the next several months, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Travis began systematically dismantling processes I had implemented. He redirected resources from stable, profitable projects to flashy new initiatives with questionable returns. He hired friends for key positions, displacing experienced team members. When quarterly results showed we were losing money on Travis's pet projects, he masterfully shifted blame to market conditions, supplier issues, anything but his decisions. I documented everything meticulously and presented the evidence to my father. "You're cherry-picking data to make Travis look bad," my father accused. "I'm disappointed in you, Billy. I thought you were a team player." Meanwhile, Travis was carefully controlling what information reached my father. Successful project completions that had been initiated under my leadership were presented as Travis's victories. Problems with his initiatives were minimized or hidden entirely. The company began losing long-term clients who were frustrated with Travis's empty promises and failure to deliver. Cash flow tightened as expensive new initiatives failed to generate projected revenues. I watched helplessly as the business my father had built over decades began showing serious signs of distress. One evening, working late, I overheard Travis and Natalie talking in what they thought was an empty office. "Your father is going to sign the paperwork next week," Travis said. 40% ownership transferred directly to me, not to both of us. "It's better this way for tax purposes. As long as we're taken care of," Natalie replied. "Billy's had the inside track his whole life. It's our turn now." I felt physically ill. Ownership shares in Andrews Construction had always been held exclusively by my father, with the understanding they would transfer to me when he retired. Now nearly half the company was being handed to an outsider who had contributed nothing to its success. The final blow came 2 days later. My father called me into his office, where Travis was already waiting, a self-satisfied smile on his face. "Billy, we need to discuss the future leadership of Andrews Construction." My father began formally. "I've decided that when I step back next year, Travis will assume the role of CEO." The word escaped before I could contain it. "Dad, I've worked my entire life for this company. You always said." "Plans change," he interrupted coldly. "Travis has demonstrated the vision and leadership skills needed to take this company forward. You'll continue as COO, reporting to Travis." "You want me to report to someone who's never even managed a construction project?" I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. "This attitude is exactly why you're not ready for the top position," my father said, his tone hardening. "Travis understands the big picture in ways you never have." In that moment, looking between my father's defensive posture and Travis's triumphant smirk, I realized a devastating truth I had already lost. Whatever manipulative spell Travis had cast over my father was complete. No amount of evidence, logic, or loyalty would break it. The betrayal was absolute, and it had been orchestrated perfectly. The argument that followed was the worst of my life. Words were said that could never be taken back. Truths exposed that had festered beneath the surface for years. "You never had what it takes to lead this company," my father shouted, his face red with anger. "You're too rigid, too caught up in the way things have always been done. And Travis does. A pharmaceutical salesman who's never poured a foundation or managed a construction budget," I fired back. "He's using you, using this company, and you're too blind to see it. Travis sees possibilities where you see problems. He's not afraid to take risks. Risks with a company you spent 30 years building. Risks with other people's livelihoods." My father stood up, placing his palms flat on his desk. "I've made my decision. Either get on board or get out." "Do you even hear yourself?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You're throwing away your relationship with your son for someone you've known less than a year." Natalie burst into the office, having evidently been listening outside. "Stop trying to manipulate Dad. You've always thought you were entitled to this company. Some of us had to work for what we got." I stared at my sister in disbelief. "Work for what you got? I've given this company everything while you showed zero interest until your boyfriend saw an opportunity." "That's enough," my father roared. "Billy, you need to decide right now if you can accept my decision and work with Travis, or if you need to find another path." In that moment, clarity washed over me. There was no winning this battle. Whatever Travis had done to secure his position, flattery, manipulation, or simply taking advantage of my father's unacknowledged fears about retirement, it had worked completely. "I'll have my resignation letter on your desk tomorrow," I said quietly. My father's expression flickered with something regret perhaps, but it hardened again, almost immediately. "If that's your choice." That night alone in my apartment, I experienced emotions I never knew were possible. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. I alternated between rage, devastation, and a numbness that was perhaps the most frightening of all. The future I had worked toward my entire life had been yanked away in an instant. The next morning I delivered a simple one-sentence resignation letter. My father accepted it without comment, barely looking up from his computer. Travis, however, made a point of stopping by my office as I packed my belongings. "For what it's worth, I think you're making a mistake," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "We could have worked well together. Save the act, Travis. No one's watching right now." He shrugged, dropping the friendly facade. Your father was right about one thing: you never saw the big picture. This company needed someone with vision, not just technical knowledge. This company needed integrity, I replied, continuing to pack. Good luck explaining to clients why their projects are behind schedule and over budget. As word spread about my departure, several employees stopped by to express their confusion and support. Some had been with the company since I was a child. Their genuine concern was the only thing that nearly broke my composure that day. "I don't understand," Billy said. "Frank, our longest-serving project manager. This place is in your blood. What happened?" "Ask my father," was all I could manage to say. I left Andrews Construction that afternoon without looking back. Within a week, I had sold my condo, packed what mattered into my truck, and headed west to Colorado. I needed mountains, distance, and time to figure out who I was without the identity I'd built around the family business. The first months in Colorado were the darkest of my life. I rented a small cabin outside Denver and fell into a depression that felt bottomless. Who was I, if not the future leader of Andrews Construction? What value did I have if my own father could discard me so easily? Had I wasted my entire youth working toward a future that was never really mine? I barely ate, rarely slept, and ignored calls from the few friends who reached out. My self-worth had been so tied to the family business that without it I felt hollow. The turning point came unexpectedly. I was grabbing coffee at a local shop when someone called my name. It was Michael Brennan, a developer who had been one of our biggest clients back home. "Billy Andrews. What on earth are you doing in Colorado?" he asked, genuine pleasure in his voice. Over coffee that stretched into lunch, I gave him the abbreviated version of what had happened. He listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "That's a raw deal," he said finally. "But I've got to tell you, son, from a client perspective, you were the heart of that operation. Half the reason we did business with Andrews was because of your attention to detail and follow-through." His words were the first validation I'd had in months that perhaps I wasn't the problem. "I'm developing a resort property up near Breckenridge," Michael continued. "Having some issues with the contractor. Any chance I could hire you as a consultant to review the project, just to make sure we're on track?" That consulting job became my lifeline. For the first time, I was using my expertise outside the shadow of my father and the family business. The project was challenging, the problems complex, and solving them reminded me of what I loved about construction in the first place. Michael referred me to other developers, and soon I had a small but growing consulting business. I specialized in rescuing troubled projects, identifying where they had gone wrong, and implementing solutions. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was fixing others' messes while unable to fix the situation with my own family business. During this time, I kept tabs on Andrews Construction from afar. Industry contacts would occasionally mention problems with projects, delays, cost overruns. I took no pleasure in hearing about the company's struggles, but each report confirmed what I had feared: Travis was running it into the ground. Gradually, as my consulting work expanded, my confidence returned. I was building something new, a reputation based solely on my own abilities, not my family name. The pain of betrayal remained, but it no longer defined me. Then 18 months after my departure, a former colleague called with news that would change everything. "Billy Andrews Construction just lost the Westbrook Hospital contract," he said without preamble. "They underbid it, failed to complete the preliminary work on schedule, and the client pulled out. Word is they're in serious financial trouble. That hospital project should have been straightforward, exactly the kind of work we had excelled at under my leadership. Its loss signaled deeper problems than I had imagined. As I hung up the phone, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could continue building my new life in Colorado, letting the past remain in the past, or I could return home and attempt to save the company that had once been my whole world, even though its leadership had betrayed me. The decision wasn't about revenge. It was about legacy, responsibility, and perhaps redemption. The information about Andrew's construction struggles continued to flow in over the next few weeks. Each call painted a clearer picture of a company in freefall. Travis had apparently continued his pattern of overpromising to clients while under-delivering on projects. Cash flow problems had led to delayed payments to subcontractors, many of whom were now refusing to work with the company. But it was Lisa from accounting, who had been with the company for 20 years, whose call finally spurred me to action. "Billy, it's bad," she said, her voice low, as if she feared being overheard. "Travis convinced your father to take out a second mortgage on the company headquarters to fund that resort project in Florida. The project is a disaster permits denied environmental issues lawsuits from investors. They could lose everything, including the building your grandfather originally purchased. That building was more than a headquarters. It was where my grandfather had started with a single truck and a dream. The thought of losing it to Travis's recklessness was unbearable." "How's my father handling all this?" I asked. Lisa paused. "He's not well, Billy. He looks 20 years older. I think he knows he made a terrible mistake, but he's too proud to admit it." That night I began formulating a plan. Not for revenge, that would be too easy and ultimately hollow. Instead, I would build something that could eventually save Andrew's construction, even if that meant saving my father from himself. I had accumulated significant savings from my consulting work and lived modestly. Combined with a small business loan, I had enough capital to launch a specialized construction company focusing on sustainable building practices, an area Andrews had neglected despite my earlier recommendations. I named it Highland Building Solutions, nothing that would connect it to me personally, and began strategically hiring key talent. My first call was to Frank, the project manager who had been with Andrews for decades. "I can't believe you're back in the game," he said when I explained my plan. "And I can't believe the timing. I was about to retire, rather than watch Travis run that company into the ground." "Don't retire yet, Frank. I need your expertise." Frank joined me, bringing 3 of Andrews's best site supervisors who had quit in frustration under Travis's leadership. Within 2 months, I had assembled a lean, experienced team who believed in my vision, and more importantly, believed in me. Our first strategic move was to bid on projects that Andrews had either lost or couldn't handle in their current state. We secured a municipal contract for a library renovation that Andrews had been favored to win until their financial issues became known. The project came in on time and under budget, establishing our reputation immediately. I was careful to stay behind the scenes, letting Frank be the public face of the company. I wasn't ready for my father or Travis to know I was back in town, methodically building a competitor that was securing the very clients they were losing. Highland quickly developed a specialty in environmentally sustainable construction, solar integration, advanced insulation systems, and water conservation technologies. These were all innovations I had pushed for at Andrews, but Travis had dismissed as too expensive and too niche. Within a year, Highland Building Solutions had grown from a startup to a respected regional contractor with 15 full-time employees and a network of reliable subcontractors. We weren't large enough to compete with Andrews for their biggest projects, but we were systematically securing the mid-sized contracts that had once been their bread and butter. Throughout this time, I continued gathering information about Andrew's construction situation. It wasn't difficult. Former employees now working for me provided insights, and the construction community was small enough that rumors traveled fast. The picture they painted was increasingly dire. Travis had apparently convinced my father to pursue several high-profile, high-risk projects, simultaneously stretching their resources dangerously thin. When 2 of these projects encountered significant problems, there wasn't enough financial cushion to absorb the losses. Subcontractors were now demanding payment up front due to Andrew's reputation for late payments. Most telling was the news that Travis and Natalie had purchased a lakefront vacation home and a new Mercedes, even as the company struggled to make payroll. Their priorities were clear, and the company's welfare wasn't among them. I was preparing a bid for a sustainable office complex, our largest project yet, when my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in over 2 years, my father's cell. For a moment I considered not answering. What could he possibly say that would undo the betrayal? But curiosity won out. "Hello," I kept my tone neutral. "Billy." My father's voice sounded older, more fragile than I remembered. "I think we need to talk." "About what?" A heavy sigh came through the line. "About Andrew's construction. About mistakes I've made. Can we meet?" I agreed to coffee the following morning at a neutral location. As I hung up, I realized that the moment I had both dreaded and anticipated had finally arrived. I would face my father for the first time since walking out of his office 2 years earlier. I spent that night finalizing my strategy. I wasn't interested in apologies or recriminations. I wanted to save the company that bore our family name, but I would do it on my terms. If my father wasn't ready to acknowledge the reality of the situation, then there was nothing to discuss. The next morning I arrived at the coffee shop, early, choosing a table in the corner that offered privacy. When my father walked in, I barely recognized him. Lisa had been right. He had aged dramatically. His shoulders stooped, his hair now completely gray. Dark circles under his eyes, speaking of sleepless nights. For a brief moment, seeing him so diminished, I felt a flash of the old affection. Then I remembered his cold eyes as he had chosen Travis over me, and I steeled myself. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, settling heavily into the chair across from me. "You said you wanted to talk about Andrew's construction." He nodded, wrapping his hands around his coffee mug as if seeking warmth. "The company is in trouble, Billy. Serious trouble. I've heard." "Travis." He hesitated, clearly struggling with what he was about to say. Travis may not have been the right person to take over leadership. It was perhaps the greatest understatement I'd ever heard. But I kept my expression neutral. "And why are you telling me this now?" "Because I need your help." He admitted, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "We're 3 months away from bankruptcy. If something doesn't change, I thought maybe given your experience, you might have some ideas." There it was not quite an apology, not quite an acknowledgement of his mistake in choosing Travis over me. Just a practical request for assistance now that he had no other options. "I might," I said carefully. "But first, I think you should know something." I slid a business card across the table. It bore the Highland Building Solutions logo, and my name as founder and CEO. My father stared at it, comprehension slowly dawning. "This is your company. The one that's been winning all those sustainable building contracts." I nodded. "I've been back for over a year. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have listened a year ago? If I had tried to tell you Travis was destroying Andrew's construction?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "Probably not. Then you have your answer." We sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, my father spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can you help save the company, Billy?" "I can," I replied. "But not by offering advice. I have a more comprehensive solution in mind." As I outlined my proposal for merging Highland with Andrew's construction, I watched my father's expression shift from desperate hope to stunned realization. His prodigal son hadn't just returned. He had built a lifeboat while the ship was sinking. "We need to discuss this with Travis," my father said when I finished. "No," I replied firmly. "We need to present this to Travis. There's a difference. My terms aren't negotiable." My father nodded slowly, the reality of his situation sinking in. "When?" "Tomorrow morning. Your office, 9 a.m. As we stood to leave, my father reached out as if to embrace me, then seemed to think better of it and offered his hand instead. I shook it briefly, maintaining professional distance. "Billy," he said as I turned to go, "I'm sorry. For all of it. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough for the pain he had caused. But it was a start. Tomorrow, Dad, 9 a.m. I arrived at Andrew's construction headquarters 15 minutes early, dressed in a tailored suit with the Highland Building Solutions portfolio tucked under my arm. The receptionist someone hired after my departure didn't recognize me. "I have a meeting with Robert Andrews," I said. "Your name, sir?" "Billy Andrews." Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh, Mr. Andrews. Yes, they're expecting you in the main conference room." Walking through the familiar hallways felt surreal. Some faces I recognized, others were new. Those who knew me stopped in their tracks, expressions ranging from shock to delight. I nodded politely, but kept moving. This wasn't a social call. The conference room door was closed. I paused, took a deep breath, and knocked once before entering. My father sat at the head of the table looking uncomfortable. To his right was Travis, who failed to hide his surprise at seeing me. Beside Travis sat my sister Natalie, her expression a mixture of hostility and confusion. The company's attorney and chief financial officer rounded out the group. Billy, my father, began standing. "Thank you for coming. I've asked everyone here because we need to discuss the future of Andrew's construction." Travis leaned forward. "With all due respect, Robert, why is Billy here? He abandoned the company 2 years ago." "Billy is here at my invitation," my father replied with uncharacteristic firmness, "and I suggest you listen carefully to what he has to say." I placed my portfolio on the table and remained standing, a deliberate power move. "Thank you for meeting with me. As some of you know, I founded Highland Building Solutions after leaving Andrew's Construction. What you may not know is that Highland has become one of the fastest-growing construction companies in the region, specializing in sustainable building practices." Travis snorted dismissively. "Good for you. But I don't see how your little startup is relevant to this meeting." "It's relevant," I continued calmly, "because I'm proposing a merger between Highland and Andrew's Construction." The room fell silent. Natalie's mouth actually dropped open. "A merger?" Travis recovered first, his tone incredulous. "You can't be serious. Andrews is 10 times the size of whatever operation you've cobbled together." "Is it?" I asked, opening my portfolio. "Let's look at some numbers." I distributed copies of a financial analysis I had prepared, comparing Highland's growth trajectory with Andrew's decline over the past 2 years. "As you can see," I explained, directing their attention to key figures, while Andrew's revenue has decreased by 37%. Under current leadership, Highland has grown by 200%. More importantly, our profit margins are nearly triple industry standard due to our specialized focus on sustainable construction, a sector growing at 23% annually. The CFO, Janet Wilson, studied the numbers with growing alarm. "These figures for Andrews are accurate," she confirmed, looking at my father. "In fact, our situation is slightly worse than represented here." Travis's face reddened. "This is ridiculous. We've had some temporary setbacks due to market conditions beyond our control. The Florida project had unforeseen environmental issues that no one could have predicted." "Actually," I countered, pulling out another document. "The environmental concerns were clearly noted in the initial site survey, a report you apparently didn't review before committing millions to the project." My father winced. The attorney shifted uncomfortably. "The merger I'm proposing would infuse Andrews with much-needed capital, bring in Highland's specialized expertise in the growing sustainable construction market, and restore confidence with clients and subcontractors who have become hesitant to work with Andrews." "And what would this merger look like in terms of leadership?" my father asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Highland would be the surviving entity, though we would retain the Andrews Construction name given its legacy in the community. I would serve as CEO. You, Dad, would transition to Chairman Emeritus, an advisory role that honors your contributions while allowing new leadership to move forward. And what about me? Travis demanded, his composure cracking. You would not have a role in the merged company. Travis slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd, Robert. You can't seriously be considering this hostile takeover by your own son. My father looked exhausted. It's not a hostile takeover if we agree to it, Travis. And given our financial situation, we don't have many options. We have plenty of options. The Henderson project is about to turn around. The bank has indicated they might extend our line of credit. The bank, I interjected, has already declined your latest request for an extension. I spoke with James Morgan at First National yesterday. They've lost confidence in Andrew's current management. Travis turned to my father in disbelief. You've been discussing our banking relationship behind my back. Travis, my father sighed. We're 3 missed payments away from defaulting on our loans. We have payroll to meet next week, and not enough in the accounts to cover it. Billy's proposal may be our only viable option. Natalie, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. This is just Billy's revenge for you choosing Travis over him. He's enjoying watching us squirm. I looked directly at my sister. This isn't about revenge, Natalie. It's about saving a company that's been in our family for 3 generations. A company that employs over 100 people who depend on it for their livelihoods. How convenient that saving it means you take control, she shot back. Highland is stable and profitable. Andrews is not, I replied simply. The merger terms reflect that reality. The meeting continued for another 2 hours. Travis alternated between anger denial and desperate counterproposals. My father mostly listened occasionally, asking clarifying questions about the merger terms. The CFO and attorney, seeing the writing on the wall, began focusing on practical implementation details. There's one more thing, I said as the discussion wound down. Before any merger can proceed, I need full financial transparency. My team will conduct a complete audit of Andrews's books for the past 2 years. Travis paled visibly. That's unnecessary and intrusive. It's standard due diligence for any merger, the attorney noted. Especially given the company's financial difficulties. I have nothing to hide, my father said, giving Travis a sidelong glance that suggested growing suspicion. Then it shouldn't be a problem. I concluded, closing my portfolio. My team will begin the audit tomorrow. I'll need full access to all financial records, project files, and contracts. As the meeting adjourned, Travis stormed out without a word. Natalie followed, pausing only to give me a wounded look that contained more confusion than anger. The attorney and CFO left discussing next steps, leaving me alone with my father. You planned this all along, didn't you? He asked quietly. Coming back with your own company, waiting until we were vulnerable. No, I replied honestly. I built Highland because I needed to start over. After you chose Travis over me. Its success is based on implementing the very strategies you and Travis rejected. The merger opportunity arose because of Travis's mismanagement, not because of my planning. My father nodded slowly. For what it's worth, Billy, it didn't take long to realize I'd made a terrible mistake. Travis showed his true colors once he had power, but by then my pride wouldn't let me admit I'd been so completely wrong about him and about you. And now I'm just hoping to salvage something from the wreckage, to not be remembered as the Andrews who destroyed what his father and grandfather built. I felt a complexity of emotions, satisfaction that he finally saw the truth, lingering hurt from his betrayal, and an unexpected wave of compassion for this diminished version of the father I had once idolized. The Andrews name will survive, Dad. But things will be different now. As I left the building, several employees stopped me, expressing hope that rumors of my return were true. Their genuine relief was confirmation that saving Andrew's construction wasn't just about vindicating myself, it was about preserving something valuable that Travis had nearly destroyed. The audit began the next day, conducted by an independent accounting firm I had retained. Within a week, they uncovered what I had suspected Travis had been systematically diverting company resources for personal use. The Florida project that had nearly bankrupted the company included a disguised payment for Travis and Natalie's lakefront vacation home. Expense reports had been falsified vendor kickbacks documented. When confronted with the evidence in a tense meeting, Travis attempted to blame accounting errors and misunderstandings, but the documentation was irrefutable. My father, ashen-faced, asked Travis to leave immediately. Natalie, upon seeing the evidence, finally recognized the truth about the man she had chosen over her own brother. The merger proceeded quickly after that. Travis, facing potential legal consequences, agreed to relinquish his ownership stake in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Natalie, shell-shocked by Travis's betrayal, retreated to our parents' home to regroup. 1 month later, I sat at the desk that had once been my father's, now mine, as CEO of the newly restructured Andrews Construction. The merger had been completed, combining Highland's innovation with Andrews' legacy and infrastructure. We had secured emergency financing based on our combined strengths and were already seeing renewed interest from former clients. The nameplate on the desk read simply, William Andrews, Chief Executive Officer. Not son of the founder or heir to the company, but a title earned through resilient strategic thinking and ultimately forgiveness. The script had indeed been flipped, but not in the way I had once imagined in my darkest moments of hurt and anger. Instead of revenge, I had found redemption for myself, for the company, and perhaps in time for my family as well. The first year after the merger was the hardest and most rewarding of my professional life. Rebuilding Andrews Construction required more than financial restructuring and new leadership. It demanded a complete cultural transformation. Our first priority was stabilizing the company financially. I invested a significant portion of my personal savings to provide immediate working capital. We negotiated extended payment terms with suppliers who had been burned by Travis's administration, but were willing to work with me based on my reputation at Highland. Several key clients who had abandoned Andrews returned when they heard I was back at the helm. The most painful part was downsizing. Years of mismanagement had left the company bloated and inefficient. I had to let go of 30 employees, including some who had been with the company for decades. I made these cuts personally, explaining the situation honestly and providing generous severance packages. Many were later rehired as the company regained its footing. Throughout this process, I maintained a professional relationship with my father. He kept his title of Chairman Emeritus, but understood it was largely ceremonial. In board meetings, he mostly listened occasionally, offering historical context but never challenging my decisions. I could see it pained him to witness his diminished role, but he accepted it as the consequence of his choices. "You're doing things differently than I would," he remarked after a particularly successful presentation to investors. But I can't argue with the results. It was as close to an endorsement as I could expect, and I took it as such. Natalie's situation was more complicated. Her relationship with Travis had imploded after the audit revealed his financial improprieties, including evidence he had been involved with another woman while using company funds to finance their rendezvous. Heartbroken and humiliated, she retreated from family affairs entirely for several months. When she finally reached out, I agreed to meet her for lunch at a quiet restaurant downtown. "I don't even know where to begin, Billy," she said, eyes downcast. "I believed everything he said about you, that you were controlling, that you resented him, that you couldn't accept change." Travis was very convincing, I acknowledged. He fooled Dad too. But Dad didn't choose Travis over his own brother. I did. Her voice broke. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did, and I'm sorry." I considered her words carefully. The hurt was still real, but holding on to anger wouldn't serve either of us. We can't go back to how things were before I said finally. Too much has happened. But we can start building something new. If you're willing. She nodded, wiping away tears. I'd like that. Rebuilding trust with Natalie was a gradual process. I invited her to contribute her marketing expertise to the rebranding of Andrews Construction, giving her a professional role that acknowledged her skills without placing her in a position of authority she hadn't earned. Over time, our working relationship helped heal our personal one. Meanwhile, the strategic changes I implemented began yielding results. We doubled down on the sustainable building practices that had made Highland successful, positioning Andrews Construction as a leader in green building technology. We secured LEED certification for our headquarters, implemented transparent project management systems that clients could access in real time, and invested in training programs for our employees. Most significantly, I restructured the ownership of the company to prevent future family conflicts. 20% of shares were placed in an employee stock ownership plan, giving our workforce a direct stake in our success. The remaining shares were split between myself, my father, in a non-controlling stake, and a trust established for future generations with strict governance requirements. "You're giving away ownership?" my father asked incredulously when I presented the plan. "I'm ensuring the company's future doesn't depend on any one person's judgment, including mine," I replied. "The business nearly collapsed because you had unchecked authority to hand control to Travis. This structure prevents that from happening again." He fell silent, recognition dawning in his eyes. I never thought of it that way. By the 18-month mark, after the merger, Andrews Construction had not only stabilized, but was thriving. We had surpassed our pre-Travis revenue levels and were now the region's fastest-growing construction firm. Industry publications featured our innovative approach to sustainable building, and we had a waiting list of clients eager to work with us. The personal healing took longer. My relationship with my father gradually evolved from strictly professional to cautiously familial. He began to acknowledge his mistakes more openly and expressed genuine interest in my vision for the company. One evening, as we reviewed plans for a major new project, he paused and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since childhood. "I'm proud of you, Billy," he said simply. "What you've built here, it's better than anything I could have created." The words I had once longed to hear now came when I no longer needed them for validation. Still, they mattered. "I learned from watching you build the original company," I acknowledged. "The good and the bad." He nodded, understanding the full meaning of my words. "The bad taught you more than the good, I suspect. It taught me to value loyalty over flattery, to trust actions over words, to build systems that outlast any individual. All lessons I learned too late," he admitted. As Andrews Construction continued to grow, I often reflected on the journey that had brought me back to the company under such unexpected circumstances. The betrayal that had once defined my relationship with my family had transformed into something more complex, a painful but necessary catalyst for growth. I discovered that true success wasn't measured by titles or ownership percentages, but by creating something sustainable and meaningful. The company now employed over 200 people, many of whom had ownership stakes through the employee stock program. We were building hospitals, schools, and energy-efficient housing developments that would serve communities for generations. The greatest lesson came full circle when Travis reappeared 3 years after his departure. He requested a meeting, which I reluctantly granted out of curiosity more than anything else. "You've done well for yourself," he said, glancing around my office with poorly disguised envy. "Andrews Construction is everywhere these days." "What can I do for you, Travis?" I asked, not interested in small talk. "I've started a small development company," he said, sliding a business card across my desk. "I thought perhaps, given our history, you might consider bidding on some of our projects." The irony was almost too perfect. The man who had schemed to take everything from me was now asking for my help. Our history is exactly why I won't be doing business with you, Travis, I replied, returning his card. I believe in second chances, but not with people who haven't learned from their first mistake. His face hardened. You think you're better than me, don't you? You had every advantage, the family name, your father's training. I had to take what I wanted. That's where you're wrong, I said calmly. When I lost everything, the company, my family, my identity, I rebuilt from nothing. The difference between us isn't advantage, Travis. It's character. After he left, I reflected on how different my response had been from what I might have imagined during those dark days after my departure. There was no satisfaction in seeing him humbled, no desire for revenge or further justice. I simply had no place for toxic relationships in the life and company I had rebuilt. That evening, I hosted a company barbecue at a local park. Employees and their families gathered to celebrate breaking ground on our largest project, yet a sustainable, mixed-use development that would revitalize a neglected part of town. My father attended, as did Natalie, both now finding their places in this new chapter of our family story. As I looked around at the community we had created, employees who were also owners' families, who depended on our success, clients who trusted our integrity, I realized that the betrayal that had once broken me had ultimately led to something stronger and more meaningful than what had been taken away. The script had indeed been flipped, not just on Travis and those who had betrayed me, but on the very notion of what success and vindication looked like. The greatest revenge wasn't taking back what was mine, but building something better from the ashes of loss. I now understood that staying silent after betrayal wasn't about passivity or acceptance. It was about strategic patience, about choosing the right moment to channel pain into purpose, about recognizing that sometimes the best response to those who would destroy you is to create something they could never imagine. So what about you? Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you respond, with immediate confrontation or strategic patience? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and redemption, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes staying silent isn't surrendering, it's gathering strength for the comeback that will change everything. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, the most powerful response to betrayal isn't revenge, but rebuilding something better than what was lost.